Hi, I'm Rebecca Bradley. This is Virtual Crime Book Club, and this is the first recording of 2023. It is Monday, the 9th of January, and we are discussing The Franchise Affair by Josephine Tey. Spoilers will be discussed throughout the meeting, so if you're watching this as a video, be aware you might want to read the book before you watch the video. So everybody here, have you read the book in full?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
Right. Chris?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, sorry.
Just checking. So, did you enjoy the book? Dislike the book?
I love it.
Enjoyed it.
Enjoyed it.
Nice gentle read.
Which is what we were after for the festive season.
Well, I was reading at the same time I was reading a Karen Slaughter book, so it was quite nice because of course she's a bit more graphic on the violence, and
yeah, she's not gentle.
No.
But I do love her.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I enjoyed the book, but as I say, it was nice to sort of like ease off with the franchise affair.
Yes. Did anybody not enjoy the read? Oh, really? Okay, that's good.
I just want to say I enjoyed the story very much, but there was a lot of backwards and forwards with me reading it. Where are we there? I had to go backwards to understand where we were. So I felt it felt to me a little bit jerky in my reading. I struggled a little bit with reading it. I loved the story and I read it right through, and I was really enjoying it. And it was a soft read. It was like very English countryside. I loved it, but it was back and forwards for me.
Do you think that's because it's a different style in the 1940s to the 2020s?
Very much so, yes.
Yes.
And that's what I struggled with. I don't read enough classics. I hands up, and that's what I struggled with. No,
me neither. I listened on audiobook and the narrator was lovely. They had a female narrator, bearing in mind it was a mostly male protagonist, but she did a really good job. So the majority enjoyed the book. Then what about it did you enjoy?
She's a very good writer. I liked her writing style. And even though there wasn't a murder in the book, she did a good job of keeping the pace on the plot. I did also struggle with, I had read this book a long time ago, and it's interesting. I liked it more, I think, this time. I appreciated her writing ability more this time. But there were a lot of characters, and I had to make notes to make sure that I remembered Stanley from Robert, from Lynn was actually Linda, and Betsy Elizabeth or Liz, and who was related to whom. So but it would have been more, I think, without. I'm not criticizing that, but it did require more attention for a relatively, what I would consider a softer read.
Do we think that's because our attention spans have changed at all? Or no, that's fine, Margot, jump in.
There is a lot of research, at least in the education field, that students' attention spans are shorter. And there are a lot of arguments as to what the cause is, and I won't get into that here, but it would not surprise me if some people have shorter attention spans, and people at the time that was written had longer ones.
Yeah, I'm not saying that Ellen has a shorter attention span, because we're talking about teenagers and the people that we're saying are definitely coming up with shorter ones. But having written in the 1940s, readers may have had been more prepared for a longer and more characters in a book than we are in the late 20th, early 21st century readers.
I think you're exactly right. I think you're exactly right. And if you look back, and I won't go on about this, but if you look back at novels written even earlier, there are, in some cases, particularly literary novels, longer lists of characters, more incidents, more things to pay attention to.
Because I know as an author myself, we are advised to keep character count down. You will know that as well.
I also think I read it differently because it felt like a light read. So with someone like, say, Barbara Nadell, who has incredibly intricate plots and masses of characters, I would probably focus a bit more on it, whereas this felt like a light read, so I probably didn't read it in the same or with the same level of attention.
Right, so you think that had some bearing on it as well? Okay. Anybody else want to talk about why they enjoyed it?
Well, what I enjoyed about it was, although it was obviously set in, a long time ago, and you really got that sense of she was writing for her time, and it did feel like a long time ago in the past. But what I thought was very good was the fact that there was so much that felt really, really current, like the fact that essentially they had their tabloid press then, and the issues that how that actually impacted on the and I thought that was just so relevant, and say bang up, it felt fresh and modern, even though the book itself the story itself was set some time ago. I really enjoyed that. I made a lot of highlights as I went along and thought, yes, that's really speaking to me now.
Yes, that's something that I've actually picked up on to discuss.
Can I just say, Jane, I absolutely agree with you on that. And that's why it didn't necessarily feel like such a light read, because it was that judging people and the outsiders and so on, which I think gave it some heft. But what's interesting is because I read it in my teens, so a long time ago, and then I thought, oh, come on, nobody's like, the press isn't like that. They couldn't care less about something in a village somewhere. And actually, I find that now it's more believable than it would have felt in my teens.
Yes. Did you find it had a feel of how current day issues are blown up on social media? But without the media, more direct, involving people. You know how the press blew it up, and then people appeared around the house, writing on the walls and sneaking around the actual property. Do you think that was what made it feel more contemporary?
I think that was really like what you see on Facebook. You see people making ridiculous judgments on people on Facebook that they would never normally do in face-to-face. It's very like the witch hunt that they had in Milford, I think.
And wasn't it the Milford rumour as well? It spread quite quickly through the village whenever anything happened. So that to me was modern sort of social media, really.
Why? Sorry, who was that?
It's human nature. I mean, people have not changed, but we express it in different ways now. Years ago, but yes, I could see people throwing bricks through the window and various other things. People are very keen to take sides and judge, and I don't think people have changed at all.
It doesn't seem so after reading this. It surprised me actually that back then, 80 years ago, they were having similar issues in a different way than we are.
based on a true story. It's happened in the 1700s. There's a girl called Elizabeth Canning who came up with exactly the same story, that she was kidnapped by 2 women. One of the women was actually sentenced to death until the so-called authorities at that time decided that perhaps something wasn't quite right with it. But that story is 200 years old.
Right.
I don't know about anybody else, but I bought my copy for my e-reader, and it actually had an introduction saying exactly what you just said about Elizabeth Canning, and I loved the book, but it kind of spoiled it a bit because it was an introduction and it told you the whole story of what had happened to Elizabeth Canning before you actually got to read the novel.
It should have been at the end rather than the beginning.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
But also, I read that, like you, I got mine from an e-reader, and I read that introduction, and it's sort of like right at the beginning, you were aware that of the fact that the story was that the girl was lying, that the women were innocent. Whereas had you not had that, maybe I guess you'd probably, Robert was so convinced of their innocence that maybe that would have worked, but it would have been nice maybe having not to have read that introduction, had that doubt there.
It just removed the tension a bit for me because I knew what was going to happen.
Yeah, I actually stopped reading the introduction midway because I was like, okay, they are revealing everything. It was actually interesting. I read it at the end, and it's interesting the analysis she makes in terms of how up to date is the romance and how out of date it is, because she speaks about classism and sexism and things like that are perhaps a bit outdated, but on the other hand, everything is updated, the relationship with tabloids and things like that. But I agree, because I was reading it and I was like, okay, I cannot read this because this is really
telling you what you're about to read.
Ruining the story. I enjoyed the book and I enjoyed all the characters. I enjoy having more characters, and the fact that we had this lawyer that was pretending to be a detective trying to find out things about this story. And I enjoyed the setting and everything. For me, as a non-native speaker, it was harder to read because the style is a bit different. So there were a few words that I don't actually know. I should actually check a dictionary, but it was slightly more difficult to read because of the style. But I liked it, and I liked the way she writes and describes people and how slow the action develops, but at the same time, and she knows how to keep things going. So yeah, it was a good book.
The one thing that I was slightly surprised by was that it's described. It's part of her Josephine Tey's Inspector Grant series, and there's I think 5 in total. And I had actually read one of them a long time ago, a very long time ago, because it's when I was studying for A levels, The Daughter of Time, because that's the one where Inspector Grant is laid up in hospital, and to amuse himself, he starts looking at the murder of the story around the princes in the tower, and whether they were murdered and whether it was Henry VII or their wicked Uncle Richard, and etc. So I sort of expected to think, oh, this will be another one about, we'll find out more about Inspector Adam Grant as the character. And of course, he barely featured in it at all. I don't know if the other, obviously there are another 3, I think, that, and this was about number 4 or 3 or 4. So I don't know if anyone's read any of the other ones about this inspector or about Adam Grant, or whether he features more in other ones. But so that surprised me.
It does. It features in the other ones as much more.
Oh, right. Yeah. Because it was like he might, it could have been anyone, to be honest. He really didn't play a part at all.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I did notice that actually, and think it was a bit strange because it was more about Robert Blair. A large majority of, in fact, no, in 1990, the Crime Writers Association named it as one of the top crime novels of all time. Would you agree that it deserves to be in there?
I'm not sure about the franchise of being up there. Certainly The Daughter of Time was voted the best crime novel.
You see, I'd never heard of Josephine Tey until she was nominated for this month.
I'd heard of her, but only because I'd read The Daughter of Time, and as far as I was aware, I didn't know she wrote crime novels. I thought this was just she was. I looked at it purely from the historian perspective.
Yeah, I read it
this
well,
was completely
and
novel to me.
yeah.
And then I had tried a few months once I'd become aware of the fact that she was a crime writer. When I was developing my interest in crime, I did have a go at I think it's Miss Pym Disposes, which is another of her very well-known ones. Couldn't get into that at all. So I had sort of like had slightly mixed feelings when this was chosen, but I did think it was an excellent read. Not sure I'd say it was one of the all-time, best crime novels ever, but yeah, I certainly enjoyed it.
But
Sorry, I missed what you said, Andrea.
Sorry, I was just going to say I didn't realise that when she wrote Daughter of Time that it was part of a series. I thought it was a standalone, and I read it from a purely historical interest.
Exactly, exactly.
I think it's quite loose. I mean, making it a series is a bit much. Would be more of a contemporary publisher's gimmick, because I think at the time she was just, writing them with quite a long period in between. She'd write a play, then she'd write another novel, and then she'd be like, oh, well, let's have this inspector out again. But, I don't think she conceived of it necessarily as a series.
Margaret,
which of course is very different from what we're used to now, where you do actually get the several books about, and then you see the development of the character of whoever the investigator is.
Yeah, and I think she wasn't interested really in the background of the investigator. Well, in this one she was, but that's because the main investigator isn't actually the inspector. So.
Yeah, Margaret, what were you saying? Sorry, I missed it.
One of her other novels, Brat Farrer, that's well up in the top 10 crime novels as well, and it's about a boy who comes back supposedly from the dead. It's quite a fascinating novel.
All right, I liked her style, so that one would be interesting.
It's really good, and it's people base a lot of other mysteries on that.
Yeah, I think this is why, so I don't know if the franchise affair is the best or amongst the top, but I think each of her novels, or perhaps at least these three that we've mentioned, have been very influential. And, a lot of people have used some of the devices that she came up with then, like with the legal, potential miscarriage of justice, or in Brat Farrer, is he a con man, or is he actually the descendant, the one who should be inheriting the estate, or the Daughter of Time, cold case mystery, if you like. So, and with the twist, where you think potentially, if you haven't read the forward, you might think that, it's actually the girl is telling the truth, and maybe there is something suspicious about these people, and then she kind of twists it. So I think maybe for that reason she has been quite influential.
The franchise affair was made into a film about 4 or 5 times, and I was looking at it, and during one film there was an actor who played Marion, and then several years later she got to play Mrs. Sharp, which I thought was quite funny.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was just a snippet that I picked up while I was doing some research. A large majority of crime novels involve murder. Obviously, there was no murder to be solved in this. Did you find a kidnapping was enough to hold your attention?
Yeah.
Yes.
Definitely.
And
I thought it was highly original. I don't really recall ever reading anything with that kind of plot line before, and therefore that's what held my attention, and it never once occurred to me that I want a murder here. I thoroughly enjoyed the whole idea.
Particularly as the villain of the piece, the girl was it did feel like she shared some of the attributes that you might put to on a murderer or serial killer, you know, completely amoral, no sense of shame, no guilt, no empathy.
She seemed psychopathic.
Sorry?
She actually seemed psychopathic.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
Just wonder what's happened afterwards, don't you? When the book ends, what happens to Elizabeth and the rest of the family? They must be broken by what she did.
Yeah. So do you think modern day crime novels could focus on something else other than crime, or are readers fully expecting, other than murder, I mean, or are readers expecting a murder to solve?
Well, it's interesting because I just saw a review today about Glass Onion, where people were saying you had to wait a whole hour for the murder to occur, by which point I'd lost interest in seeing who was murdered and why, you know, why it happened and who done it. And I thought, yeah, I think, and very often aren't we told, oh, you've got to have the dead body within the first few pages, you know, otherwise, or have at least a prologue where something is something bad is going to happen. So.
Yeah, so if it's an actual crime being committed crime novel, not a psychological thriller, one where there is a crime, do we think that readers now expect that crime to be a murder?
Probably. But I do enjoy a book where the first 50 pages are all about the characters. I actually enjoy the character development. I like the setting of the story. So I actually prefer like long books where the first 50 pages are all about different characters. And then eventually you get the murder. But I guess that most readers, crime readers, they would expect a crime like at the beginning. So then the investigation starts. I actually like some context before I get into the crime. That's just me.
See, this is why I like Karen Slaughter, because her character work is brilliant.
I like Elizabeth George just because she has these huge books and the first like 50 pages are all about the characters, and then eventually there is a crime. So I do enjoy her.
But I think you've got to be quite established now to be able to wander like that for a while before getting on with the crime now, which it goes back to the attention thing, I suppose. You've got to catch the reader's attention, but that, I suppose, part of that is to do with the amount of books as well, not just because it's easy to put a book down and move on to the next one, because there are so many books we all want to read that we'll just move on to the next one if the first one hasn't caught our attention quick enough. Are we patient?
Yeah, in a different sort of like in a different context, I've got this theory that for example, somebody like Philippa Gregory, who is very well, you know, obviously very well known, very well thought of, her historical fiction is excellent, etc., etc. When you think of some of the things that she started off writing, as that they are what I would call almost like bodice rippers, or for want of a better expression. And I have this theory that and there are other writers, if I thought about it, that I can think of that had the same label. It's almost like they had to do that to get themselves printed. And then once, as you say, once they're established, then they can start writing the sorts of things that they're really interested in writing. And I suspect that maybe, again, it's the short attention span, the not wanting, you know, say, and it's a shame really, because as I say, I'm sure there are many very good authors that just never get into print because they don't, as I say, they don't they don't play by that particular rule. They write what they want to write right from the beginning, which is more honest, but actually, as I say, probably doesn't do them any doesn't do them any good service in the long term.
Yeah.
Well, also television is like that too, where your crime is in the first 5 minutes usually, and then it's done in an hour. So it caters to that short attention span.
Yeah.
I try to give, if I'm watching a box set, I try to give it 2 or 3 episodes before I give up on it.
Mm.
So I do try, not just like half an hour, I give it a few episodes. But I do give up on things. So am I as guilty as everybody? I'm as guilty as everybody else. If I'm not enjoying it, I'll give up. So
well, life's too short, isn't it?
times, yeah.
Mm.
Right, we've discussed the Emma. The people, they found it easy to believe the two women did as they were accused. Why do you think that was? Why were people not more questioning of these two local women that they knew?
Because she was just this young, innocent looking young girl. Like, how could she possibly make this up?
I think her story was too complete.
Well, and she was too young, really, because I mean, it takes a long time in our lives, maturity and whatnot, to expand our lives, and she had all the T's crossed, the I's dotted, and I think normally that would be extremely hard to believe from such a young person to make up that story.
I also think it's because they were incomers, if you like. They weren't, they didn't belong.
Yes.
They were new. And
they were outsiders.
I mean, there's still places up in the north of Scotland, and you could have lived there 20 years, but you're still an incomer. You're not, you weren't born there, you didn't grow up there. You'll never really truly belong because you're just an incomer. So I think they have a little bit of distrust.
And they were also perceived as being rich.
Yes, exactly. I was going to say big house, a little bit of envy there.
Yeah, I think so. The rest of the town really didn't have that level of a house, and anyways, it was just perception.
And talking of Marion and Mrs. Sharp, not just those, but out of the book, who were your favourite characters? It's just talking of them makes me smile. Because Mrs. Sharp was mine. Because I had the book narrated and Mrs. Sharp was brilliant.
I quite like Stanley.
Yeah.
The hands-on, I'll do anything sort of chap. I quite like Stanley.
Anybody else favourite characters and why?
I liked Neville because his character grew. It just changed. He matured through it.
Yeah.
The poem about, was it her eyebrows? Did he write a poem about Marion's eyebrows?
Something like that. Yeah.
Something like that, yeah. But yeah, I love Neville too. I thought he was great. He had this 1 minute he's madly in love with the bishop's daughter, or whoever she is, and she's off protesting about everything. And then he comes across Marion, who's an equally strong character. So he's drawn to these sort of strong women, and he's trying to work out who he is himself. And he's just kind of floundering along, turning up at the office, doing nothing, apparently, in between. It was very funny, very well drawn.
Yes, Marion was strong, because when at the end Robert wanted to marry him, she's like, no, I'm not going to look after you like Aunt Lynn. Anybody else?
I felt I wanted to get to know Betty better than I did. I didn't think that she was only sporadically appeared actually in the book, and I wanted to get inside her head and try and figure out exactly why she did what she did, and I never really felt that I got to know her.
That's a really good point, actually. Out of all of the characters, we're discussing them and saying why we like them, and there's a quirky take on each of them. But the person at the centre of all this, we didn't get or did you, I'll ask the question, did you feel you knew who she was?
It took me a long time because you waffle, like is she telling the truth? Is she not? To finally kind of come to the realization she was a psychopath. Just plain and simple, and you don't want to get into their heads. But it took me a long time to get on the bandwagon, because it was very hard to not believe her. She was so young. How could she possibly make this up?
Yeah, and above all, there was like, what is the reason? Why would she make it up? You know, there didn't seem to be any reason for it. So yeah.
I like the fact that I didn't really know her though, and you read the novel as you went through it, because as the novel went on, you learnt a little bit more and a little bit more, and you know the mystique of that was for me was very good in the novel, because I was more concentrating around the main characters, Blair, Sharps, and all the time this sort of control of this girl over them, and really controlled the story, but without really knowing a great deal about her, except little tidbits here and there as you're moving on.
Were you surprised by the ending, bearing in mind we'd all been led down this path of what she'd said had happened?
I think having read the spoiler alert that the introduction proved to be, I guess there would be some man involved and whatever. I thought it was I hadn't seen coming was the fact that his wife was the one that had inflicted the injuries on her. That I thought was quite an interesting and the fact. Again, that the wife was a very interesting character. The fact that she was used to her husband, she knew exactly what he was like, and quite happy to tolerate it. But this young piece had gone and overstepped the mark, and needed to be put back in her place.
I was surprised about the trip to Copenhagen. It was, oh my gosh, not only she had taken up with this man, but he had taken her on this international trip while he was doing his business work. And one thing that kept on going through my mind is, if this were a modern setting in the United States, he would have been arrested. She probably would not have been punished. The wife, I don't know what if she would have stayed with him or not. But it was a pretty incredible story then and now. And I remember
because she was only 15.
Right. I remember when I read it, I couldn't believe it. I was a lot younger than, well, very young. And I was really surprised at how I felt about how differently I felt about it this time versus the first time around. I've forgotten the details about going abroad.
What's the age of consent in the US, Ellen?
Generally, well, it varies by state.
Yeah.
And it can be anywhere from 14 to 16. So depending upon the state.
I think some states are actually 18. Because that's what Jeffrey Epstein ran into problems, because the one person was 17.
Well,
and so
I don't want to go down that road, but because this is complicated, because it's the United States with our different rules.
Right, shall we move on then? If it's all, we don't want to go into politics.
Okay, it's not politics. Well, it's not politics, but it's law. The reason, and this depends upon what year the book would have been set, because especially prior to the year 2000 in the United States, if a man paid for sex, even to a minor, he could be arrested on a misdemeanor for soliciting prostitution, but the girl would be arrested for being a prostitute, even if she was under the age of consent. And in the state where I am, that law was changed within the last, well, in this century, in the 21st century. So it really, really depends. But so if this book had been sent in the United States, maybe in the 80s and 90s, then she would have been arrested for prostitution, possibly. And if it could be proven that, you know, she had accepted anything of value for him in exchange for sex. But in 2023, it would be more likely that he might be accused of, especially since he took her into another country, child trafficking. So it's complicated.
Yeah.
But that was the thing that I did not like, what shocked me a bit was, okay, she was a pathological liar, she was a sociopath, okay, she was obviously someone that had issues and she probably needed some psychological treatment, and okay. But at the same hand, she was still a teenager, and we have this guy who is an adult, is married, and he still takes this girl that he knows is not really right in the head. He takes her to Copenhagen, he has sex with her, and he brings her back. He puts her in this bungalow and he intends to keep her as his mistress or something. And then he goes on court and he says all about this, and nobody finds this weird. So at the end, he's not even punished. She was still a teenager. So at the end, he should know better. Even if she didn't, he should know better because he was an adult. But probably this was
maybe that's just a change
at that time. So
maybe that just reflects a change of attitude generally in the intervening years. That maybe there was a whole mindset at one stage that would have just said she brought it upon herself. She was the one if the blame attached to, whereas now you would look much more closely at the man and say, no, this is not right. This is he bears the greater responsibility. And I say maybe that shift is just a shift in attitudes since the book was written.
You could be right, because the rest of her writing about how the press were and the people around it all sound as it currently is.
Yeah.
So the fact that she's not picked up on how we'd expect things to be looked at the ending probably means it wasn't like that then.
No,
but I do wonder, and I don't know if she intended it or not, I do wonder if a little bit, because the case, as we said, the 200-year-old case and so on, there was a little bit of a sort of witch hunt, as in actual witch kind of accusations sort of potentially related to it. And I'm wondering if she's sort of seeing the girl as well as, because, you know, we're kind of going from one extreme to the other. Or the people in the book are going from one extreme to the other. So now they found the new villain, which is the girl. And in a way that feels like, well, are we just repeating the same thing again? Yes, she did do this time. It is perhaps more justified, but are we again over, you know, being overly negative about everything and making her to be the sole villain of the piece when actually there are a lot more people involved?
Did you feel satisfied with the way it ended? That how it was resolved? You were maybe wanted more of an ending with the guy?
I think I was a bit surprised that he'd gone and jumped on the plane. I think I'd have been happier if it had stopped, you know, just before that, where they'd left. But it was
I
good.
actually liked that ending. I liked it that he got out of his comfort zone and got on that plane and pursued it a little further. We don't know if it's going to go anywhere, but I just liked that he was getting out of his comfort zone more and more.
I like the court case. I enjoyed that. I enjoyed the way the barrister from London Kelvin or Kevin or whatever his name was, sort of slowly but surely broke her story down, took her apart, and where the prosecution ended up not even challenging points. I've liked more in the courtroom. I love that sort of drama. But I was happy with the outcome, and thinking about what you were just saying regarding the age of the girl, she was 15, she was a child, and the man, and that they were more interested in a court about perjury. The police are going to be speaking to those perjurers, and I'm thinking here that in modern day society, a rape has been committed. And it was just like brushed off.
Yes. Does the man and his wife just go off into the to live out a life of marital bliss, or whatever serves as marital bliss for them?
Yeah. Yeah, that was. I love the courtroom. I love the drama, and I love the way it was broken down there. I'd loved more of that, but that was satisfying to me.
Did it feel strange that we were all I can't think of the word, like on the side of Kevin when he was, you said, breaking down her and her story when she is this child? We're all like on Marion and Mrs. Sharp's side, but it's against a child. But she had put this horrific accusation against two people and could have sent them to prison. So we were all like wanting her story to be destroyed. But
I suppose for me, it was more about putting right an injustice on the Sharps, and the story was the injustice. So for me, getting that right was the better part of the story. Yeah. I think, the whether we wanted the girl punished or not, with our modern heads on our shoulders, it's like, oh, we need a bit of help here.
You just want the truth to come out.
I wanted the truth to come out, and the truth came out, and that was good for me.
Yeah. Okay. Would people read any more by Josephine Tey?
Definitely.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. And can I also recommend Nicola Upson, UPSON, has a series of novels in which Josephine Tey plays the detective. And actually, initially I thought, I'm not sure about this, but they're actually really, really good. I really enjoy them.
I've
got the first one. I haven't read it yet, but
I've read them all. Yes, they're very good.
Margaret, what was that book you mentioned by Josephine with the boy in?
Brat Farrer. Brat Farrer.
Brat Farrer.
Yes.
Is that the name of the book?
Yes. Farrar. Brat Farrer.
Maybe we should put that one down for a potential for next Christmas as a read, as another nice, gentle one.
And one of her early ones, is it something with candles, shilling for the candles or something like that? Yeah, I think was Alfred Hitchcock made a film of that one.
Yeah.
Right, so we were happy with this festive season's read then this year.
Last year.
I know Mary Stewart used Brat Farrer as the basis for her novel The Ivy Tree.
Right, brilliant. Does anybody else have anything they want to say about this book? No? Okay.